Y'all ready?
I guess I'm ready-ish. I got my 7 pages of notes. Come at me, I guess.
I actually don't have that many notes. I only have like 2 pages.
You didn't try hard enough.
True to
I
form.
didn't.
True to form. I have none, and I'm ready to rumble.
You have none? Really? Okay.
I haven't taken notes for the last fucking 3 casts.
I have to have these because how am I going to field the hundreds, billions of questions you guys are going to ask me about random shit?
Oh yeah, because you were basically on reference duty this entire time.
Yeah. I didn't even write them all down. I just got some things that basically anything that wasn't explained in the show that I had to go look up, I fucking wrote down. And not for every single joke, but just for the ones that were interesting or that didn't make any fucking sense at all.
If something didn't make that much sense to me, I just struck it up as, okay, I don't get it.
You just kind of keep going with the show, yeah.
See, I have to know. I have to know every single joke. They needed to explain every single joke.
Are you sad that in the selection of this, you did not have a sub that had footnotes like 24/7? Would you have?
That's a tough question.
Would you have liked to have had a sub that would have given a detailed footnotes for Konada's discussion about the Gundam series over the years?
Oh,
the fantastic thing is I was proud of myself. I actually got most of what they were talking about. I was like, yes. A mild proud moment for myself.
It's so weird. This show definitely wasn't for me because there were some times where there would be a joke that I would perfectly get. Like, I would just get it. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense because I've seen this done before. I've looked this up. I know exactly, like, a lot of the Japanese culture references. Like, I got it. Nailed it. And then they would just explain it in the show. And I'm like, I already know this. You couldn't have explained these several hundred of dozens of other jokes I didn't get. You explained the one that I got.
Yeah, that is pretty much about 80% of the show.
And I'm just
in a lot of ways. I guess I'm gonna have to just say from the get-go, I tried watching this show a couple years ago. I don't remember specifically how long ago this was, but I tried to watch the show a while back. And admittedly, it was at a time where I wasn't quite as deep in anime. Like, I was super into anime when I was a kid because, oh my god, Toonami, Dragon Ball Z, all this, kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the shonen, a lot of the action stuff.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like a reverse bell curve because it's like, I'm at a high point, I'm like, yeah, holy shit, anime. And then, for a while, I'm like, oh, what is this? I'm in the no man's land, and my experience with anime was limited to Death Note, Bleach, and Naruto. Which, again, if that's your thing, cool. And I think it was a little after that period, probably a few years after that. And I tried to watch the first episode of this, and I was like, why the fuck are we spending 4 minutes talking about a fucking chocolate coronet?
Actually, it was more like a 7 minutes, but yeah, it was a very long discussion.
And so I got past that. I think I got about halfway through the episode and just stopped. And so I came into this show with that sort of being my point of reference. And admittedly, that's not a good way to come into the show, but I tried to go in, as objective as I could. I'm kind of in your boat a bit, Matt. I still don't think this show was necessarily entirely my cup of tea. I definitely see how it could be for some folks, but I don't know. Like, the show had its high points, and I enjoyed some of the kind of the dull, mundane banter that makes up a lot of the show. But also sometimes it just made my eyes sort of glaze over a bit.
Yeah.
I realize I'm kind of just rambling sort of at this point, which is somewhat intentional because that's sort of thematic to the show in a lot of ways.
That's pretty meta right now. You're getting
Yeah.
meta with me.
But it wasn't a bad show. I didn't think it was a great show either. I didn't hate watching it.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm probably going to just be. My general opinion is the same as yours, kind of. Differences we'll talk about later.
For sure.
I guess for me, as someone who typically does have slice of life anime that they watch like every single season, so that typically does like them, this was my cup of tea. Especially because
Oh yeah.
especially because a lot of the references are stuff that, not all of them, obviously. There's a lot of references I didn't get, but at the same time, there's a lot of references I did. So I enjoy referential humor, so that was something that I enjoyed in the show. That said, I completely understand why people coming into this show now, rather than when the show first aired, would absolutely not be into the show. Especially because for Slice of Life, it has a very slow start. Like the first half of this show is real slow, and then on top of that, almost all of the humor is dialogue. It's not even like in a lot of other slice of life anime. There's a ton of jokes that are just like slapstick or they're visual comedy or something like that. This is almost 100% dialogue for a good part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I can completely understand why somebody might not enjoy the show or might not enjoy the show as much as like I did. That said, I enjoyed it. I was definitely a little worried. I even put it in my notes here. Like it's a bit of an iffy show for the first half, to be honest, because it's just a lot of dialogue heavy humor, which can be funny. But then they start to like repeat jokes, and it's not just like repeat jokes and then put a new twist on it, which they did several times. There are times when they literally repeated a joke verbatim,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think definitely annoyed me. But after it hit like episode 13 or 14 and kept going, I felt like the show got a lot better, like a lot better.
Oh, that's interesting.
Probably because that's different from what you think, Matt.
Yeah. So basically, I guess it's kind of flipped exactly what you said. You said it had a slow start, and how that was the mundane part, and the show got better.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I kind of was of the opposite opinion. I was actually more okay with the show as it started, and then when they started to repeat the jokes, like you said, because I did notice that problem, that it kind of, repeated the same jokes over and over again with no new twists.
It got a little heavy around episodes like 1 through 14, or sorry, 11 through 14. They started repeating a lot of jokes.
Yeah, and then let's see, episodes 14 to, what do I have down here? 17. Yeah, 14 to 17 was not a good time for me. I hated those 4 episodes.
Really?
Like, I loathed them. It was horrible because I was just like, I wanted just everything to stop.
What, you weren't a fan of the Cosplay Cafe Haruhi skit?
I mean, they already did 100 Haruhi jokes. Like, I was tired of Haruhi jokes by this point.
Come on.
I was worn out. On Haruhi jokes. They already made 100 of them. I didn't need any more. And then, like, they started repeating the jokes. Like, there's that fucking boob gag they started at, like, 4th episode when the new character's introduced. And
Minoru?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minoru or whatever. Yeah. Like, that started around, like, episode, I don't know, 15 or so.
When she was
Then,
introduced.
yeah. And then that's literally carried on until the very end of the show. And I was just tired of seeing the same jokes over and over again. The first half was okay because I felt like at least the jokes were done once, And I just, that was a personal thing. I was just like, there's these jokes. I don't really like them, but I'm okay with them. I'll deal with them. But when they started repeating them, I started getting frustrated because I was like, you could be doing many more things with this show.
Mm-hmm.
See,
That's fair.
that's kind of interesting, like you said, because for me, like episodes like 13, 14 onwards, what I felt really added to the show and made it a lot better was the fact that one, for one thing, they weren't consistently 100% always in the classroom. They were actually going out. They were actually doing other things, which they had done a couple times before, but it was nice that they were doing that more. Two, and I think this was the biggest thing, is that like it felt like they had gotten to the point where they had done everything that they really could do as far as the jokes go. But then they added in double the cast that they originally had, and I felt like that fleshed things out a hell of a lot more. It was like we had seen a couple of these people before, but they only had like one or two lines, and now they had a consistent place in the show, and then they added a whole bunch of new people, and so there was a lot more character dynamic that they could make jokes off of, that they could do more stuff with. And I was very excited about that. I was very happy with that. And I felt like that definitely bumped up a lot of the humor that they had in the show, and kept things going a lot better instead of feeling a little bit more stale. Because sometimes we would just focus on the side characters for like almost the entire episode, and that was cool. It felt a lot more fresh to me.
And I can understand where you're coming from with that. I wish they weren't all just sort of lump introduced in the second half of the series. Like
Yeah.
I sort of wish they had been incorporated a lot earlier on, because I didn't really feel myself caring much for a lot of the newly introduced cast, because I felt like um, at some point around the time that the extra cast was introduced, like we'd finally sort of got to know the main cast a bit more, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, cool. I guess I'd like to know a bit more about them now or something. And the extra cast felt a little unnecessary in some ways. Like I feel as though, and I understand where you're coming from. Like having these new characters gives them new avenues to approach with their jokes and humor and such. But I don't know, in some ways that feels like that's the only thing they exist for, to sort of be like, okay, well, we're sort of running out of stuff with the main cast, so let's branch off and do things without the main cast.
I don't know if I would entirely agree with that though. And mostly because the extra people in the cast did two things to the show that I both genuinely enjoyed. One, yes, they did branch off and they were able to do a little bit more interesting jokes because they had different characters with different personalities. But it also changed how the dynamic of the original cast functioned, because a lot of these characters that we had come to know were suddenly put into different situations where they were acting and behaving differently and had to adjust to different things with different people.
Yeah.
Especially if you're looking at the little cousin that stays with
Utica.
them.
Or Utah.
Yes. She definitely changed things up a lot. I mean, obviously she had a lot of focus put on her, but like she added a little sister element to what's her name with the blue hair?
Konata?
Yeah, because they always
Oh
use,
my god.
they always use Izumi, and it always messed with me because I was like, which one am I gonna use? But like Konata, like I'm tired, man. Give me a break. Konata, like all of a sudden had this had this situation where there was an addition onto her family, and it was very interesting trying to see her balance like being the same relaxed, no cares in the world kind of person, but also like trying to like put up a front in front of a little sister that might like she might rub off on.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean it's very simple. It's not that they went really in depth with it or anything like that, but I greatly enjoyed that. And the same could be said for a couple of the other characters too, like Kagami, who her two friends that we barely saw at all. They actually were added to the cast, and it kind of fleshed things out for her and gave her better opportunities with just different people. I felt like those character dynamics of the main cast in comparison to these new characters, or working with the new characters, I felt like that added a lot more to the show and made me a lot more interested instead of just going with the flow and seeing the same thing over and over again.
That's fair. I don't know. It just like it sort of gave me, and I know it's not exactly an equivalent comparison, but it gave me like flashes of Nisekoi-esque kind of things where it's like, oh my god, there's even more characters to go with now. I don't fucking care, and it's just in so many shows where this additional cast gets added on, it's like, okay, well, we have new folks, and it's like, oh, there's some funny new shenanigans now, but it never feels as though they get quite as fleshed out as the original main cast, and as a result, I don't care quite as much for them. Like they don't leave as much of a lasting impression on me. And honestly, like sometimes it's that sort of moment where I feel like I would have rather have just gained a deeper understanding of the main cast. Not that I'm saying like you should never fucking add new characters to your show or something, because like there's plenty of shows that does really well, but personally I just wasn't feeling it in this one.
Yeah, and I kind of get that. I wasn't really a fan of most of the additional characters that they decided to add in either, for most of the same reasons that you said. And yeah, I guess that is kind of a thing where I've seen a lot of shows that just they tack on these side characters and it just doesn't feel necessary at all. And I don't know, I guess this show kind of just felt like it was another one of those instances where it didn't feel necessary to me that they needed to be there. I just wanted to see more of the cast doing things the way that they did.
I don't know.
I guess.
For me, I enjoyed additional characters. I mean, obviously, I've already said that, but like,
yeah,
I enjoyed it because we had seen the same 4 characters for like 12, 13 episodes at this point. It starts to get stale if you don't mix it up a little bit. And they could have like just taken the same 4 characters that they had and gone more in depth with them, but that doesn't really fit the tone of the show. At least I felt that it didn't. So I was told,
doesn't fit the tone of the show.
Well, I guess I can kind of understand what you're talking about in that, like the way one might view it is that this is supposed to be sort of lighthearted, doesn't go too much below the surface sort of show.
Right. When this show came out, Slice of Lives, I mean, they had been done before, but like the slice of I would argue that this like massive wave of slice of life shows that we have now was not existent whenever this show came out. And every single week whenever this show was coming out, very obviously it was just a fun, simple half hour in which they had some jokes and then they made references to shit that either was currently airing or, had previously aired. And if you're an otaku, you get the joke. It's great. It was just supposed to be a lighthearted, like 23 minutes of your time. And so like it wouldn't really fit the tone of the show to all of a sudden make things incredibly deep. That said, they had a couple of moments, like whenever Koneta's mom like came to visit. She had been dead for a while, and then she came to visit her ghosted. It was a very endearing moment. And it was a nice little side note that you typically would get from a KyoAni show like Nichijou or something like that, where they get these small little endearing moments along with the humor.
I want to point out that just sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to interject there.
Yeah.
So I just want to point out that I have a feeling that scene that you're talking about, I like that scene, by the way. That was like my favorite part of the show, because that's what I wanted out of this show. I really wanted something like that to happen, and it finally happened, and I felt so rewarded. But I think I wanted a show more along the lines of Maid Dragon than I wanted a show like Nichijou. I wanted this show to be like Maid Dragon, I guess, in my mind. I wanted the slice of life tone, but I wanted the serious introspective moments as well. And I feel like there are parts of this show that nailed that, and then the rest of the show just didn't work for me at all.
Maybe was it that you went in with a I'm not going to say wrong, but you went in with a very different expectation than maybe you needed to in order to go into the show?
Well, I went into with that expectation because that's what I wanted to watch.
Oh, okay. Well, but I mean, like, I went into the show knowing full and well, because I had seen a little bits and pieces before. I knew full and well that this was just going to be a slice of life, that it was not really going to be introspective or anything like that. And that's what I got, and I was totally fine with it.
Yeah.
If I would have went into that mindset, I think I would have just dropped the show. There's no way I could have taken 24 episodes of that knowing it.
I do have
But
to
here
say,
I am, so.
when I say like I wanted to get to know the characters a little deeper, I don't mean that I was expecting introspective moments, and I'm not saying that that's what I wanted from the show.
Okay.
What I mean is like I feel like I would have just liked some more, because it feels like we have, by halfway through the series, a lot of stuff really fleshed out with the characters, and so I feel like it would have been fun to build off of some of those things that we had learned about them over the course of this half of the show, and got a little more humor just building off of that. And granted, they do some of that. Like, there's some fairly consistent gags. Like, there's, I mean, from, I think, like, in the first, like, 3 or 4 episodes, we see, like, Miyuki gets a cavity or something, and she doesn't want to go to the dentist at all. And there's this whole fucking saga throughout the whole show where she's like, "Oh, I'm finally going to the dentist. I finally got a filling." And then, like, in one of the last few episodes, like, I think her filling falls out or something.
Yeah, she heard that chewing like gum that's good for your teeth would be good for your teeth, and then it pops her filling out.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny. Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, I appreciate some of these, continuity things they sort of do. And like, the thing where, Konata is like, "Oh my God, there's this comic fest coming up. I got to get a job." And then, it just goes all the way through. It's like, oh fuck, she's just working at a Cosplay Cafe now. And this is, it's something that continues and something she comments on here and there pretty consistently.
But then you finally get to see it.
Yeah. And so like, I feel I kind of wanted to see a bit more of that is sort of what I'm talking about. Like, I wanted to see some more follow-up with things that they had discussed, possibly.
Would you define
Okay,
it as...
I kind of get that.
Would you define it as progression?
Somewhat. And again, in a slice of life show, I understand that that's not always a big thing.
No, but I think I agree with you in that sense, because that was something that I actually enjoyed about, to take another KyoAni example from later, that was something that I enjoyed about Nichijou, was the fact that, yeah, it was funny and it had a lot of really good humor, but there was also a natural progression over the course of the episodes that you actually felt like these people were living on, like, and you're just kind of checking in with them like every other day or so.
Yeah, like, there's so many slice of life where, it's not like there's a big plot line or anything, but you do feel like things progress. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that.
Yeah, they didn't have too many moments. Yeah, there was the cosplay thing. There was the saga of the dentist. There was, what was it? Minami and shoot. Yeah, it was Minami and Mayuki, who like were really lovey-dovey towards each other, and then
the Yuri shit.
Yeah, but which was nice, but then on top of that, it was also funny because Minami was the next door neighbor of what's her name? I'm forgetting everybody's names now.
Hair color.
Pink.
Okay, there's two pink. I guess there's technically two pink hair characters. This is slowly not working.
Main cast. That's Mayuki, isn't it?
That's Miyuki, yeah.
Miyuki? Yeah, I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it was matter.
Like, yeah, it was the what's the little cousin's name then?
That's Utica.
Okay. She was attracted to Minami, and it was cool because Minami actually was the next door neighbor of Miyuki, and so but that was like an unspoken thing, and they just didn't realize. Like, nobody else in the cast realized. And then they kept dancing near it a couple of times where they're like, "Yeah, you should come over to my house," and then they just didn't say anything about it. And It wasn't until they get into the fireworks festival that they're like, "Oh yeah," and it was kind of cool to see like that along with the dentist office along these jokes that actually spanned like a couple of episodes and showed some progression of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and those were the best jokes of the show, in my opinion. I like that, and this is probably a case of where I'm just spoiled because this is like Kyo Annie's like one of their first shows, and then I've seen all of their later shit, and it's like, oh, it's I guess it's nice seeing the roots, but
Right.
the roots aren't the best part. So um, I guess that's kind of how I viewed the series.
No, that's fair.
I would say, yeah, when this came out, I think the reason why it's so popular is that when this came out, it was very much kind of new for its time. I mean, they'd obviously done parody shows before, they'd obviously done slice of life and comedy shows before, but the way that it wrapped everything up and had that Kyo Annie flair, it was very new at the time, and it was very and right on the heels of like Haruhi and stuff like that. I think this was a standout for Kyo Annie, and so like people latched onto that, and I think that's kind of why
Yeah,
it
and I
became so
appreciate
popular.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
especially because it was like actively making fun of things that were airing. Like that's great. I hadn't
Mhm.
really seen that type of thing outside of like maybe Jin Chicken, which I'm the only person here that actually cares about that. But it was but
I might
it's
if I watched it.
read the manga and then just go watch Nadime. um but like, yeah, it was like both Jin Chicken and this were sketch comedies. They're both making fun of things that were currently going on in the anime industry. But it's like they're two very different shows in that Jin Chicken was actively making comments on not just the industry but the people themselves that watch this stuff and get involved and are just nerds. And they were kind of like making fun of them, but also wrapping a well-written story about a bunch of adults. This is a bunch of high school kids, and they were just slice of life fun and references.
Right.
Mhm.
But those are the only two shows that I can think of from this time that did this kind of like parody stuff while stuff is going on. So it's kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, for sure. Like
and
it's really viewing it as a product of its time and
Yes.
how it sort of navigated that sort of cultural landscape. Like
Yeah.
I totally appreciate it for what it was going out to do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that said, I did see this say this in my notes, but like I don't think that the art style in it is necessarily dated. I mean, obviously the eyes are way larger than what most anime do nowadays, and like, but it's kind of comes down to like character design. I don't think the art style of the animation is necessarily dated. I think it's just a lot of the humor's dated.
Oh god, yeah, like it's perfectly watchable from a visual standpoint. Like I
Yeah.
think there's a lot
Yeah.
of shots that are fucking
Absolutely.
gorgeous.
And
Matt, you and I were talking about this. Well, I think we were all maybe talking about this, where some of the art is very reminiscent of, like Maid Dragon and things like that. There were a lot of nice little in between
Like
sort of watercolor
hand-drawn
frames.
stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh god, I love that kind of stuff, and it was
Yeah.
so I'm like, okay, well, this is very much,
and I'm also
Kyoto.
Yeah,
getting
and
a
don't-
lot of feel of like Nichijou as well. Although they both have their different brands of humor, animation wise, I think you can see some similarities.
Yeah.
I didn't actually look and see who did the art direction for Nichijou. But
I don't
I
think
think
it's the same person.
I don't know if it is or not. There's probably some of the same animators. I mean, if it's all in-house Kyo Annie stuff, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's likely there's some crossover. But yeah, I definitely got kind of like a Maid Dragon feel from the hand-drawn stuff in the backgrounds and the direction as well, since it's basically the same person. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it is the same person. It's Takimoto or yeah.
Also,
don't know
just
his full
looking
name,
at a
but-
still frame that I have open right now, I would also say some of the reactions and like their emotive faces kind of matches some of the like cutesy, ridiculous stuff in Maid Dragon.
hmm
Mhm.
and more just more recent Kyo Annie in general.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think there are aspects of the show that are dated, which is going to make it a lot harder for people to watch. But I don't think that in any way makes it a bad show.
No, like again, I don't think it's a bad show. It's
Yeah.
just I feel like in some ways, I definitely feel like I would have liked watching this more if I was watching it around the time when it came out and I was
Yes.
active in the community.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so in this sense, it's kind of like, well, I missed the bus for this one.
I feel like even if I watched this anime like before I saw like like if this was one of the first anime that I watched that was like this would be really freaking cool as well. Like I think this would be an actually halfway decent introductory anime if you wanted to show someone a slice of life.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think it would be
I
pretty
think
good for
yeah.
that.
The only stipulation to that being is that like I really felt like they cut down on a lot of the. I may be wrong because you're the person that was researching this. I felt like they cut down on a lot of the references in the latter half, but they were real fucking heavy on that for like the first 13, 14 episodes.
Yeah,
And I think that is going to be a little bit of a barrier to entry. But if you're willing to just like look past it, if you just don't understand any of the references, a lot of the like more simple slice of life humor definitely can shine through.
well, if you also think about it, if you wanted to show us an introductory anime, most people probably have already seen Haruhi at that point. Like Haruhi was one of the first anime I watched, and I started watching anime like what 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's
So
true. Outside of your
so
typical
if you
shonen, that was one of the first ones I ever watched too.
I still
so
haven't watched it.
so that's interesting. But I think that there's a good chance that someone that is being introduced to this show might have seen Haruhi just by viewing just a couple of anime. So
Mm-hmm.
They
I'm
at least
not gonna.
would know about it most likely.
Yeah, yeah. I think exactly. So I feel like it'd still be a pretty good introduction. I think maybe it would have been more effective if you would have seen it like when it came out or whatever. But
Definitely for like Babby's first slice of life, I think this would be a great one.
yeah, Babby's first slice of life. Oh my god.
I no, and I will say one thing that definitely helped elevate the show for the people that may not be entirely sold on just the normal humor that the show has. And definitely at least elevated my score for the show was that it wasn't just a slice of life show in the sense that like they had these main characters and they went through school life. It also had two other things that I massively enjoyed, which was the Lucky Channel and then the post credits.
Fuck me, man.
I
Lucky Channel
The
was what I
saga
lived for
of the
when
Lucky
watching every
Channel
episode.
was amazing.
It was for me. Lucky Channel was the highlight of this show, except for maybe a few scattered parts in the main show itself. But just the fucking saga of Dear God, I love Shiraishi, and Holy Sweet Jesus, I hate Akira with a flaming passion. I simultaneously loved and hated Lucky Channel because I was like, Jesus Christ, how long is Shiraishi gonna have to put up with this shit? And that's also the same reason why I kept watching it. I loved it because I was like, oh my god, how long can Shiraishi put up with this shit? And to be entirely honest, I fully expected Lucky Channel saga to end out with Shiraishi just being completely, just submissive the whole time.
And then he just ends up
himself.
fired or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that. Like when he's sent off to go get fucking water off of Mount Fuji. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is where that stuff ends. But then a few episodes later, he just walks in and fucking destroys the set.
Like he just fucking wrecks up the place.
It was that sequence is my favorite part of all of LuckyStar.
Yeah, that was a very good segment, and I'm pretty much of the exact same opinion there. I loved Shiraishi to death. He was like the star of the show for me, and Akira just like I kind of wish he would have died, but that's just me. So
A couple of the things that I loved about Lucky Channel was that like the fucking the dynamic between the two characters was fantastic, and then as that developed and just suddenly devolved more and more and more as the show went on, that was great. On top of that, I also liked how it was a direct commentary on what you just watched, and like literally was just breaking the fourth wall and shoving it in your face. I enjoyed that, but then I also enjoyed how they would pretend to be actors that then would sometimes have cameos within the show. And I liked seeing that as well, to where they would constantly talk about their cameos or what they were actually able to do.
Right.
in the show, and I like that a lot, especially because once you get to the last episode where they're literally both in the show finally, and then they just are acting exactly like they do on Lucky Channel, as if they're like not even given a script. I thought that was pretty great. Um, I really enjoyed all of that as well. And then I massively enjoyed like the first half with the post credits where it was like a lot of different references with songs was cool. I, as somebody who likes very strange, weird humor, I massively enjoy the post credits, or I guess it is the credits actually,
Yeah.
for the second half where they just had the voice actors doing dumb shit in the real world.
Yeah, like the
It's so
karaoke,
bizarre.
the
It is, but I
karaoke
love it.
segments. The karaoke segments were fine, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is all right. But yeah, and I'll never fucking forget. Like, you know, it had just been where Shiraishi trashes the scene, and then it cuts to him, like his voice actor and Akira's voice actor, and he's just in the middle of a fucking farm, and he says, "Welcome to Idaho," and starts doing this. It's just the weirdest shit.
And then
The
there was
sky
the
starts
one.
changing to
Yeah.
like this scene of him like fucking climbing in trees and
Yeah.
like climbing. I'm like, what is happening? It was the most surreal thing, and I was just, I was like, after just again a par for the course episode, all this post main episode shit happens, and I'm like, oh,
And then like,
what are you doing to me?
gosh, the one where they had the whole like bride in the wedding gown, and then they take off the veil, and it's just the male voice actor, and he's like smiling goofily. And then the one where he starts it off with something along the lines of like, "Are you interested, ladies?" And then he just like starts singing.
Oh my
It's
god.
so great.
I don't like.
Gosh.
It's just,
And
that
you can
was
hear
crazy.
you can hear the cameraman and everybody else behind the camera just fucking dying the entire
And-
time.
And like I'm serious. I genuinely enjoyed the humor in Lucky Channel and in those sort of credit scenes more than the vast majority of the humor in the main show.
I don't know. For me, I think, and maybe it was just because I was getting more used to it. For me, I really enjoy. I agree with you. I did enjoy that shit so much. But I felt like it kind of the humor in the show, at least for me, as it started to approach the final episode. I would guess from like episode 15 onwards for me. I felt like the humor was starting to pick up and get better.
Mhm.
And so for me, I felt like it at least wasn't like severely lagging behind Lucky Channel and the credits scenes. I felt like it was at least starting to catch up a little bit.
And again, I still do respect a lot of the humor in the main thing. Like I kind of sort of got in. I really got into the banter itself. That though granted, having that be such a large basis for the show's driving force in general got a little
90%
tiring. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I still appreciated that, but I don't know. And maybe I enjoyed Lucky Channel because it was such a big fucking shift from what the entire core of the show was humor wise, but I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that Lucky Channel and the credits stuff was probably my favorite part of the show. That said, I still, at least on my part, I still really enjoyed the actual show itself.
Yeah, no.
Well, I mean, I like Lucky Channel. It's just, I don't know, the humor in the main show just really wasn't working for me at all. But even if it was any other, even if it was any other show, I can name like a half a dozen shows that are just like this, like Working or Yuri, that are like basically the exact kind of thing, and they didn't work for me either. So like that's just a me thing.
I mean, if we're gonna compare slice of life, I would at least argue that this is better than Working. But I know that's a biased opinion, and I don't have much to back that up. I just enjoyed this more than Working.
I mean, I was just slice of
watched-
life that
I
the
watched 3
jokes that
fucking
didn't work for
seasons.
me. So you watched 3 seasons.
I did. Oh gosh.
I mean, this
Dang.
was a 2-core. It was like watching 2 seasons. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at one point Lucky Channel even talked about that at like the split between 12 and 13. It was just like we're headed to season 2.
yeah, and I was like, no, it's not season 2. It's just the 2nd core. You're wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be much more to talk about. I mean, it was a very simple show when you consider it. It wasn't incredibly deep or meaningful. It
Oh
was
gosh,
just
no.
it was just supposed to be something that came out every week and made some jokes to make you feel good.
Yeah, and that's the point. It's not supposed to be anything super deep.
I guess that's really where my expectations going in start to divulge from my actual experience, was because literally everyone will reference this show. I swear, people that probably have never even seen this show will reference this show.
Yeah, it is pretty synonymous with anime itself. Like,
know-
I mean,
Yeah, I
even
guess you're
before
right.
even after, like, at the point where I started really watching anime, but before I was, really getting deep into stuff, I even fucking knew what LuckyStar was. I was like, well, yeah, I can tell you what that is. I know the fucking intro and all this jazz, and if I see one of the main cast, I'm like, well, I know what that's from. So,
Mhm.
just by the sort of cultural proliferation, it's just everywhere.
Yeah, and I know my it was like my first experience with this show, even before I even knew what the show was called, was with like the AMV Hell movies that came out like forever ago.
Oh god, yeah.
And all of that was put on by the American anime community, just like getting together making fun little clips. But like well over half of the clips that they used for every single one of these like quote unquote movies was Lucky Star. So I think that's kind of a testament to how much people enjoyed this show when it came out. And honestly, I guess it kind of paved the way for a lot more moe, a lot more slice of life shows to come out after it. Especially because like people, I remember a lot of people in the anime community, like a few years back, Matt, you and I saw that like they were making comments like they fucking hated this show because they're like, this was the death of anime when this show came out, because it was the moe show that caused many more moe shows.
I'm not gonna lie. As I was researching this show, I found some forum posts on Anime News Network that were from 2010, where people were like, "Moe is killing anime because of Lucky Star."
I remember we saw that. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is 2010.
Yeah,
like
3 years after it aired.
I know. And people are still saying that today, unironically, I might add.
Yeah.
So maybe not Lucky Star specifically, but definitely a contributing factor.
And I love it too, because even Lucky Star itself comments on moe multiple times, and it's the same argument literally everyone has every time they bring up moe. Well, what is moe? And no one can define it.
Yep.
They actually had a discussion about that in the episode.
They did,
one of the
yeah.
episodes.
Literally within one of the episodes. And it's true, even to this day, it's a very hard thing to define because it's so subjective and it's so arbitrary and it's such a nebulous of a term. You can't pin it down. So this argument is probably just going to keep going on unless all of a sudden all moe shows died. But then what defines a moe show, and how would that die?
Oh no! I feel like we've talked about this before somewhere.
We did in the first few podcasts. We did. Nobody watched them, please.
Also, we wrote that whole post on moe, but that's
we did. Yeah.
Okay, we're bye. No.
But anyways,
it was relevant.
It's one of those things that like when this came out, this was apparently the fucking show. Like so many people reference it, so many people love it, so many people hate it, and apparently within the anime community itself, it's spawned a lot of things after it, not just from KyoAni. So it definitely has lasting power, and like you said, Zach, it's synonymous at this point with anime. It's kind of a must watch for a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess bottom line for me is it wasn't really my cup of tea. I probably would have enjoyed it more if I watched it, back in the day. And I respect its historic significance as
Mhm.
far as, contributing to anime, whether or not people think that is a good or bad thing, but, whatever. I don't
I'm
think it's a bad
gonna.
show. It just wasn't my thing.
I think I'm gonna just take what you did and do the Twitter response and say same.
You only have like what 144 characters, so you gotta be concise.
Yeah.
For me, I respect the show for what it did at the time. As someone who grew up watching anime in like the 90s and early 2000s, I got some
Mhm.
of the references, so I can enjoy that. At the same time, I think for anybody that's going to sit down and watch this now and hasn't seen it, um, it's it's not that it's a bad show in any means. And in fact, I think it's a good show and I like it. But it's one of those things where it has so much hype built out around it. Understand that it is just a simple slice of life show with references. That is what
Yeah.
it's always supposed to been. They even while making the show, they didn't make it out to be some big haughty like we're hot shit kind of thing. I don't think they ever did. It's just it became that because it was just so unique at the time. So
Mhm.
go in understanding that it's a show, is good, but it's a slice of life with references. It's not the second coming.
Right.
Dang. I'll have to write that down. Not the second coming. All right. Mythos.
That would be a different show, which we did a podcast on.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, no.
I do super appreciate that they basically had Domon Kashu in this show as well as a fucking salesman at that comic shop.
Oh, the segments with him at the comic shop was pretty good. I like that.
Fucking
Yeah.
Anizawa.
The-
Mhm.
he was a fantastic character. He even showed up on Lucky Channel, and I loved him in that. Like it was
Yeah.
great.
Just fucking popped in. It was great.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Not really.
I mean, I have a lot of stuff I could talk about, but there's nothing that's really relevant enough for me to talk about it for now. So,
You can always make a post on it later.
yeah, well, this is not relevant to a post at all. It's nothing constructive, I guess is what I was trying to say.
Is it just like
if you
If you
internal
can't say
screening?
anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Dang. No, it's not that. It's
Okay, we
just
can't have a podcast then, Kyle.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, it's just
even if I fully liked the show, I would still say I slightly hated it just to play the devil's advocate just a little bit. It runs in my blood.
We have the Goldilocks of people for this show. So one of us hated it. One of us was like, "Man, it's okay," and then one of us was like, "I like that."
That's kind of how this podcast dynamic works sometimes.
Well, at least we have different
It
opinions.
often does, actually.
Okay, I guess there's nothing else. So I don't know. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. Backloggers.
Yeah.
The underscore backloggers, isn't it?
Yes, the underscore back. You don't even know our own Twitter handle.
I run my own Twitter. I don't need your handout.
I run my own Twitter too, man.
Okay, yeah. I guess
Yeah.
we'll catch everybody for the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.